we're going to give it another couple minutes before we get started here, so sit tight. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started today. Thank you, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. And for those of you watching this later on demand, thank you for joining us and watching it after the fact. This is part one of a two-part series. The second installment will be next week on March 27th. And by registering for this webinar, you will be automatically registered for that one as well. Reminder, emails will be sent out to you early next week. We know your time is very valuable, and we certainly appreciate your support and your interest. Before we jump in, a couple quick housekeeping topics. This session is being recorded and will be shared to you afterwards via email. You might notice on the right-hand side of the screen, we do have a chat feature. So please feel free to use that throughout the session to ask any questions that come up, or even if you feel the need to give us some feedback on what you're hearing throughout the presentation, please go ahead and do so. We will have a couple of associates who can help answer your questions throughout the conversation, as well as having a Q&A toward the end. And finally, we're going to share some useful resources with you right before the Q&A. So you'll be able to download those and use those internally at your districts. So we're going to go ahead and set the stage here with some statistics. Today's conversation is really going to focus on the overarching theme of safety in schools. And so I want to put forth a couple different slides here, first of which focusing on self-harm and mental health and well-being. 70% of students have sought out mental health support at schools. 2.7 million youth are experiencing severe or major depression. Suicide is now the second leading cause of death for our youth between the ages of 10 and 14. And then lastly, 20% of teens have seriously considered suicide at some point in their life. Then on the other side of today's conversation, we're going to focus on physical security. And these stats were pulled from some FBI research that's been done on mass violence in schools. So 51% of school shooters or attackers have engaged in observable planning behaviors throughout the process. 80% of those attackers have elicited concerns by bystanders. 86% have exhibited a pattern of low-level violent behavior. 89% of attackers have displayed objectively concerning behaviors. And finally, 100% of attackers have displayed warning signs. All of this being said, a lot of this stuff is preventable, everybody. So it's upon us to do our due diligence and utilize all the resources that we have at our disposal to put our best foot forward and try to do everything we can to protect our kids. So let's get into some introductions. We got some great panelists today, and I want to make sure that you guys all know and are familiar with them before we jump in. So let's start with Christy Frias. Christy, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I apologize for the voice. I'm a little under the weather, but I am currently the Director of Student Services for the San Marcos Unified School District, which is in North San Diego County in California. We are serving roughly 19,000 students. In my current role, it's the typical child welfare and attendance role, so attendance, discipline, and enrollment. But in addition to that, mental health, health services, and wellness. And then I also oversee our SROs and I'm the incident commander for our incident command systems. I know that seems like a lot, but so much of the work overlaps and intersects and plays a vital role in the comprehensive safety and wellness of our students. So thanks so much for having me. I'm really grateful to be able to be part of this discussion today.
Thanks, Christy. Jim Peterson.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. My name is Jim Peterson. I am a technology director, former teacher turned technology director in Bloomington, Illinois, right smack dab in the state, between Chicago and St. Louis. I've got about 6,000 kids. I work with various departments and being able to protect kids, including our safety and security offices and our child welfare groups that are working with kids to make them feel safe at school.
Thanks, Jim. Amanda Sutter.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Good morning, good afternoon. I am Vice President of Product at Lightspeed. I've been in product management for quite a while now in a few different industries. My last 2 roles have been in ed tech, and that's a space where I'm really passionate about. I'm excited to work on products that seek to protect and keep kids safe, and happy to be part of this conversation today.
Thanks, Amanda. And finally, Michelle Gay.
Hey, everybody. I'm Michelle Gay, Executive Director and co-founder of Safe and Sound Schools. I am also a former educator turned school safety advocate, based on some very personal experiences that my family experienced in Newtown at Sandy Hook School. Tragedy experiences and loss experiences. We lost our younger daughter in the tragedy at Sandy Hook School. Really kind of galvanized us around this mission and legacy that we created for our little girl, Joey. And that mission is Safe and Sound Schools. So, we get to join forces with lots of people like this panel and talk about solutions and really have difficult conversations and look at how we can better, prevent, respond, and recover our communities from all forms of crisis that we're facing in today's ever-changing world.
Thanks, Michelle. Okay, so as I mentioned before, we have a great panel here, able to focus on the safety conversation from a number of different aspects in terms of how it pertains to us in our school systems. So let's jump right in. Let's focus on the overarching theme of safety to start. That idea has really changed quite a bit over the last 5 to 10 years. There have been a lot of enhancements that schools and districts have had to make to try and keep up with societal changes. These changes have had to encompass physical, cyber, social and emotional well-being, mental health, just to name a few. Michelle, your organization does a great job tackling all of these challenges with the events and programming, as well as the content that you put forth. If you can, tell us about your organization's mission and what you're trying to accomplish, and talk to us about what you see in terms of that organization's evolution over the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our mission in short is supporting school safety. But then the big question becomes, what is school safety, right? And if you ask 10 people, you'll get 10 different answers. And usually those answers kind of lean in towards what any given person's skill set might be in the school or community. Maybe it's, physical safety and security, maybe it's cyber, maybe it's mental and behavioral health, maybe it's actual health and wellness. Maybe it's culture and climate. It really all depends, I think. And that right there is where we chose to lean in as an organization, given the myriad challenges of school safety that we see across the country. It's a little daunting, right? You look at that and you look at all these different kind of views of what school safety is. So we really chose to kind of step back and look at the big picture. What are all the things we're facing? What are all the kind of areas of concern and threat and challenge and really areas of opportunity? And so we developed what we refer to as our framework for comprehensive school safety. And you're kind of looking at a version of that right here on screen here. So we've identified 6 key domains of school safety. And each one of these is, in and of itself, enormous. There's all kinds of programs and experts and initiatives and resources that exist within each one of these buckets, as we kind of loosely call it in our organization. But I'm going to take you through them a little bit just to cast that vision of how we look at school safety and really try to embrace the big picture, but also make it bite-sized, if you will, for folks, so that there are key areas that you can resource map and you can realize, gosh, we've really done a ton of work in physical safety and security, but not so much in mental and behavioral health. And those are really strong needs in our school community. So this is designed to help us not miss anything, kind of map our resources and really fill those gaps. So mental and behavioral health is a very big domain, one of our cornerstones that really refers to everything from behavioral threat assessment and management, to suicide prevention, bully prevention, a lot of the social emotional development and skill building that we like to see in our kids and within our community. And some of the folks that we have in our school communities that can help and support that are school psychologists, social workers, school counselors. We even have community-based providers that can help and support as well. So really want to help folks to understand and explore that domain and understand and explore the resources that they have and they still need to develop. Health and wellness, really kind of a standout during, the height of the COVID, pandemic. I felt like nurses were suddenly recognized for all the amazing things that they champion in our schools and communities, but making sure that kids are healthy when they come to school, that they're fed, that they're managing stressors, their overall wellness is at a state where they're ready to come in and learn and participate. So lots to explore in the health and wellness domain in terms of nutrition and wellness, vaccinations, healthcare. Some of our schools and communities, particularly in California, where we've got Christy from, we see some of our school communities have health clinics, and that's a great example of a way to support health and wellness right in the school community. Physical safety and security is one that I think, that's where a lot of people go in their heads when we talk school safety. They're thinking locks, they're thinking alarms, technology, apps, and that's correct. It's about setting us up in the physical plant. How are we setting people up? What tools do we have? What processes, what layers of safety and security? And nowadays that includes all things cyber and online, which we're going to talk a lot about today. Culture, climate, and community is another cornerstone. It's one that I think a lot of people take for granted, but the idea here is that we really are engaging the community, our students, our staff members, our parents, our school leaders, of course, law enforcement, all of those folks that you would hope to see at the table. But this is an area where it comes down to community engagement. Are we creating a shared culture and a welcoming climate for all students and families in school? So there's a lot to that. Leadership, law, and policy really refers to, who's at the helm, who's helping to, clear a path, chart a course, develop a vision, develop school policies, help us to understand laws and codes and all of those things that we need to adhere to. That's often our superintendents, our state leaders, those types of folks that really kind of guide the mission and kind of block and tackle for most of the work that happens at the ground level in our schools. And then lastly, operations and emergency management. That refers to another area that I think we're all pretty familiar with these days, the drills, the procedures, what are the routines, what are the processes for day-to-day things like arrival and dismissal, and also what are the processes for a crisis? What do we do when there's a fire or a tornado or an act of violence on or near campus? So having those things set in place and making sure that everybody knows what to do, everybody knows the language, and everybody is trained. So that kind of gives us the broad picture of those 6 domains. And of course, there's lots to explore, but hopefully it gives you a sense of the fact that you're not in this alone. School safety is a team sport, and there are a lot of amazing people with gifts and talents in each and every one of these areas that make up this big super team that does school safety for our schools and communities.
Thanks, Michelle. I love this framework because, let's be honest, the thought of safety, it's intimidating, right? There's so many different ways that this can be attacked, no pun intended, that's a terrible word to use, but this framework's a great reference for districts that can't quite wrap their head around how they want to start going about this. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Jim, Christy, let's talk a little bit about how you guys are attacking it on the local level. you guys have very different roles in your districts, but, as we talked about during the introductions, your departments are vital in terms of working together to make sure our kids are feeling safe. So do you guys mind talking a little bit about what your roles are in helping to facilitate the safety and security of kids in your schools on a daily basis? Christy, let's start with you, if that's okay.
Sure. So as I kind of explained in the introduction, I oversee quite a bit, and really, as Michelle kind of went over all of the domains, that's kind of what I do on a daily basis, is a little bit of all of those things. One of the major things we did in San Marcos Unified is we really recognized the need for additional mental health resources within our community. So as we all know, throughout the pandemic, no one was left unscathed. Everyone was impacted in some way, shape, or form. And we saw that especially with our students, but even with very young students. And I think that was the part that was the most alarming to us. Being in education for a number of years, it wasn't something that was typical. And so our district's answer to that was something that we've called the Let's Face It Together campaign. And that is a way, it's our mental health campaign. And really our goal is to destigmatize mental health and getting help. And it's not just for our students, it's for our students and their families. And then there's also supports built in for our staff members as well. Because when we talk about safety, so much of that starts with feeling good about who you are and where you're at, and your own mental and behavioral health. So it's a three-tiered approach, much like the MTSS system. We have, posters and campaign, garb all over the district. So when you come on our district, you see that this is happening. We have access to the National Crisis Text Line for students, and we publicize that. We have other entities that we use to help get students referrals to mental health services. And then in addition to that, we created wellness teams. And these are actually teams of 2 that go out in home to meet students and families where they're at, to really assess what the largest barriers are and help them get access to resources, whether that be mental health related, housing insecurity, food insecurity, legal aid, whatever the case may be. What is preventing that child and family from connecting with the school? That connection and belonging is so important on all levels of safety. And so we've really, really focused a lot of our energy and effort into this campaign. And it was a partnership with the city of San Marcos. So we were really lucky to have funding through them. And so that's been kind of one of the biggest ticket items that we as a district have implemented to really help with the focus on safety. And then I would say on the other side of that is really, really strong development of our EOC, our Emergency Operations Command. We are a fine-tuned machine at this point, because our EOC doesn't just meet for massive events. We meet for even small events. We activate for even if there was a car accident in the area that may affect traffic going into a school. And the reason we do that is so that then when there are larger scale events and incidents, we are more readily able to address those quickly. And we've worked out all the kinks on the smaller incidents. We also debrief every single incident. And if our sheriff's department was involved, or if our fire department was involved, or any other community agency was involved, they are brought in for that debrief as well, so that we can iron out any of those situations and any kinks that happened along the way. And it's really, really helped us with larger scale events, because we're able to respond more quickly and effectively and get students and staff the support that they need immediately.
Yeah, no, it's a lot that you have to manage on a daily basis, but it's all extremely vital. Jim, how about you from the technology side of things? What are you guys doing in District 87 to help facilitate these challenges?
Sure. When I was teaching, the first thing we always wanted to consider was student safety and security. It's obviously just as important as making sure they get the right amount of sleep and eating and things like that in order to be able to perform well. That safety and security has always been really close to me, because I want kids to feel safe there. That's the first part to making them be able to learn well. As I moved into a technology role, that's always been in my background as well. We, in the past, it's always been about curriculum apps and kinds of things that we were doing for various, learning kinds of things and curriculum things. But it's changed a lot over the last 10 years, I would say, especially. We're just more involved with integrating different technologies that have evolved into the landscape of supporting safety and security for kids. Everything from our cameras no longer, everybody has surveillance, especially after Columbine and things like that. That's when we first started doing it. But now the cameras are doing more, right? We have tool sets where we can end up being able to even identify that there's a gun on campus. It actually does recognition, just like it would do facial recognition for a gun, and automatically within fraction of a second is going to our local resource officers and to our police in town as well. So those are some of the things that just continuously evolve in the stack of technologies that they're there to support every area. It's not just the physical security and those kinds of things, but it's also the emotional security, making sure that they have the right data to these various systems, and it's updated all the time, because a lot of that comes in to looking at like triggers or different points of data that are telling us we may have something we need to look into. So there's a lot of technology just keeps evolving more and more, but it's not just evolving more in one area. It's like spreading out to everybody. And I think that's pretty clear because you see that in real life today. Technology is just a factor in everything we do. We always have to consider lots of things that technology brings to the table, but what it can also affect too. There's a lot of personal privacy issues and things like that. But in general, as a technology director, our roles really have changed. There's a significant portion of my day that's more focused on safety and security kids than we ever did before, just because we know there's holes and there's things that we always need to work on and keep working with the various people that are trying to affect it.
Thanks, Jim. All right, so Amanda, for those of us that are on the vendor side, we also have an obligation to our partner districts and schools to do what we can to help solve these problems that they're facing on a daily basis. So if you don't mind, discuss, when you're working with schools and the digital fence that they have to work within, what factors do you consider when you're looking at, developing new tools or enhancing existing products to help districts protect these kids on a daily basis?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll say that all of the decisions that we make are done with our customers and the students that they serve in mind. And fundamentally, it's important for us to understand the challenges that districts are facing and how those are evolving. So when we think about new features or tools or product enhancements, we do think about them through a variety of lenses. For one, we think about the priorities and constraints and concerns of our customers. So for example, we hear, time and time again about time. There's never enough of it. The schools are running very lean, and time is a precious commodity that nobody has enough of. Just listening to Jim and Christy today, they're both wearing many hats. So they really don't need another thing to learn and more data to analyze. They need tools that are going to make things easier for them and give them actionable insights. So we take that into account. We seek to build tools that are intuitive and easy to use and have efficient workflows. To do that, the partnership that we have with districts is really essential. So we have discussions with them to understand their problems. We get feedback from them. We get concepts in front of them. We validate usability and get early access testers. And that partnership and collaboration is really critical. So that's a little bit about some of the functional factors. We ensure that it's solving a problem. It's built to be efficient. It's reliable. It's scalable. It adheres to student data privacy standards. But the problems that we're helping to solve are really about protecting kids and providing tools to help keep them safe. So within that realm, we think about, how student digital behavior is evolving, and it's changing rapidly. How students are using their devices, how they're communicating with each other, and how and where concerning behavior is surfaced to ensure that we're building in the most comprehensive and holistic way possible. So we think about coverage, we think about, concerning behavior happens across all different device types, across websites, across productivity suites. And we think about ways that we can connect the dots on that behavior. And every, new feature and new product that we build has to work across all of those things to make sure that it's a really comprehensive tool, and that we can be as proactive as possible in identifying those, threats before they escalate to action. So really, the whole process from ideation to concept to release is a collaborative one that we work in partnership with our districts. And that feedback is just really invaluable at each stage of the process.
Great. Thank you. So let's switch gears a little bit and let's really start talking about the change and evolution over the past few years. And Michelle, I want to circle back to a point that we had made earlier in terms of the regional events that your organization hosts. Would love to hear about some trends that you've seen develop within the attendees of those events and maybe what benefits you've seen come from the conversations and the partners that you've had. And maybe even if you have some time, share some stories or examples of cases that you have seen attendees put into action that have come from ideas or strategies that were discussed at those events.
Yeah, it's one of the most rewarding parts of this mission that we have. I think it's probably no surprise that a former teacher would dig in on providing education, right? It's just incredibly empowering for folks, when they get their hands on good information, best practice guidance, tools, resources, whether they be technological or informational. Those are all game changers in terms of how we can keep our schools and communities safe. We sort of fell into the regional summits, honestly. We had been doing an in-person, national summit each year and, kind of planted a stake in Texas, thinking, it's kind of easy for folks from all over the country to get to us there. And then, of course, the pandemic struck and all of us, had to rethink how we serve our schools and communities. So we moved to a virtual model, and we kept that virtual model. We've kept it, since, I guess 2020 when we first started it, and then realized though that there was this need as things were opening back up again for some more tailored kind of conversations. School safety is unique to each community that seeks to address it, right? Each individual building or district or geographic location, urban, rural, suburban, all of those things kind of make a unique, fingerprint for each and every school community. So this demand for something, can you do something in our region and bring us together in person? And so those have really taken off and provided for wonderful professional development opportunities in the format of a summit or a conference for us. So we have, quite a few each year. We're up to like 6, a year. Our next one's going to be in Bowling Green, Kentucky, the Southeast Summit. So we kind of move them around to different places within each region. But it's always really exciting to bring community together, learn together, share ideas and resources. So we bring folks from all across the country to these regional summits, and we tap into regional talent as well, because this panel is a great example. Folks on the ground doing work in districts and communities are just, they have a treasure trove of resources and experiences and like real-time learnings to share with folks. So it's a fun mix. And we look forward to continuing to provide those for schools and communities. And even now we have, state school safety centers that ask us to help put theirs on. So we have one coming up in Utah in June that we're super excited about. So it's just great. It's a community thing, just like learning. It's a community thing. And it's really wonderful to be part of, such a growing field, but it has changed as you said, to your point, Ryan, when I stepped into school safety, a little over 11 years ago, of course I had, some background in safety, having been a school person. Safety is, kind of your top charge. Make sure that your kids, your students are safe every day. There's a lot that goes into that, but it was always kind of in the background. It wasn't this primary directive. It wasn't spelled out for us. And now I'm pleased to see the intentionality that each of us are able to bring to the work. When we talk to Jim and we talk to Christy and, hear about, the thought that has gone into the structure that has gone into making sure that these processes are evolving and growing and improving constantly. That's like light years ahead. So it's amazing that there's been that level of progress in such a short time. But I think, some of the exciting things that we get to see when folks are exposed to each other, sharing ideas, even in a format like this, people are hungry for those ideas. They want to make their work better. They want to make their schools safer, and they take little nuggets. They take inspiration from some of our national level speakers, from some of the regional experts, and then they go back and implement them, and then they tell us about it. And that is really exciting to kind of like watch what happens when, right? So, kind of a fun example. We have a great program called Especially Safe that we developed in honor of my daughter Josephine, who was a child with a lot of special needs. And one of the painful lessons that we learned out of her experience in the tragedy was that her special needs were really not intentionally accounted for. There was not really a specific safety plan in place for this nonverbal, autistic, apraxic, mobilely challenged, visually impaired, child. Like how does that child do a lockdown? Well, it was sort of just kind of an afterthought. And thank God we don't have to worry about things like this in this wonderful little community of ours, right? And so, we really took that challenge to heart and created this program around supporting school communities in the planning and preparation for individuals with all kinds of special needs, whether they be physical, mobility, developmental, English language learners, trauma histories. All of those are things that we have got to take into account when planning for the safety of individuals in our community. And it's really exciting when that light bulb goes off for people in one of those sessions. And we heard from an SRO in Tennessee who took the program back, literally just plugged it right in, championed it. And I was visiting their school for a different training that we were doing. And he said, "Hey, I just want to show you this individual safety plan that I have made for these 3 students. I want to see how it's going." And it was just amazing to see how this came to life and was supporting these 3 students and kind of opening eyes to how they could collaborate and the resources that they actually did have available that they didn't realize. And probably most excitingly, how they were incorporating parents into the planning. Parents are tough to get involved in safety. You got a few that are very, very vocal and want to be part of it and tell you often how to do it, right? But it is very hard to get that kind of community-wide understanding and engagement. And here was a great example of these parents plugging in with their expertise and joining the team and helping not only their child, but helping other individuals in the community with special needs. So it is all about the learning. It's all about sharing. I think that's something unique to school communities. We beg, borrow, steal, from each other, and we do it gladly because it's always for the good of our kids.
Mhm.
That's awesome. Thank you. Jim, tell us a little bit about some changes you've had to make from a physical security perspective in District 87, and what effect have you seen those changes have on the day-to-day lives of your students?
Okay. I think some of the main things that have been like coming out lately has been not just like I said before about the cameras and being able to look at who's coming in the building, but also these, obviously we've increased our staffing, making sure all doors, there's a one entryway kinds of things. It's obviously inconvenienced a lot of people. We go through that at first, but then after a while that goes away because people really do understand the importance of securing our physical space for the kids. But we also added additional technologies that will check things for, when the people come in, they swipe their ID and it checks against a database of, people who are maybe a threat to children or those kind of things or have court orders against them. That really helps us out a lot too. And that's been one of those really nice tools. But we also, being able to look at the data that comes in from these systems also really helps us. And then we match it up with other kinds of data. I think that's really important in finding those gaps and then figuring out what other kind of things we need to be able to do. So yeah, I think there is some kind of inconvenience, but I honestly, we do see more and more the kids are recognizing that that's there for them. And we're here to first protect them. Again, going back to that original thing when I was a teacher, I want my kids safe and secure so they can start learning and feeling like they don't have to worry about certain kinds of things, and just focusing on that. Ryan, does that help you out?
No, that's fantastic. Yeah, thank you. I think inconvenience is a good way to put it at times, but in the grand scheme of things, what's a little inconvenience if it ensures the safety and security of not only yourself, but the other hundreds or potentially thousands of kids in the same building as you. So thank you for sharing. We probably have just a little bit more time to talk a little bit because we have some questions coming in, and I know we got about 10 minutes left in the conversation. Christy, there's one other point I wanted to talk about with you. Personally, I have the pleasure of being married to a high school counselor, as well as being the dad of not only a teenager, but an almost teenager. This affords me the opportunity to have a lot of conversations with my wife that I can use and apply to my day-to-day work. One of the items we often discuss is that kids lack the ability to cope anymore. So when they're facing adversity, they're often resorting to self-harm or suicidal rhetoric and ideation, whether that's to make it known that they're struggling or to get attention or whatever the case may be. Have you seen any of that, Christy, in San Marcos? And what are you doing to help work through those kinds of issues with your students to get them back into a good place mentally?
Yeah, so I think, as I said earlier, we've definitely seen an uptick in that kind of behavior and those types of feelings that students are having. And definitely the Let's Face It Together campaign is a huge resource for that. I think another thing too, though, is we oftentimes, well, we all know students, most everybody at this point, are attached to these lovely devices constantly. And so though they may not be articulating out loud how they're feeling, they're probably looking at things online or searching for things online or finding places online to put that out there. One of the things that has really been helpful for us as a district is we've set up protocols for when we have students. We've set up protocols in place for how we use Lightspeed in our district. So we are a Lightspeed district, and we were prior to me coming into San Marcos. So I've only been in San Marcos Unified for 3 years. But one of the things when I came in was I heard about Lightspeed, and I saw that I felt we were kind of underutilizing it a bit. So when we have students that maybe seem like they may be disconnected or perhaps have come up on as a potential risk to themselves or others, one of the first things we do is we log into Lightspeed and we start checking their search history. We start looking at what websites they're looking at. We start looking at any of the things that they've searched for. And I personally am the one who typically does that in the midst of a threat assessment. So while the school is handling their threat assessment and interviewing the student and anybody else involved, I am at the district office actually feverishly going through their entire history via Lightspeed. I think another component that has been especially helpful for us is the human review component of Lightspeed, because that has truly helped us save lives in our district. So in the evening hours or over the weekend, when students are typing things in about self-harm, or they're searching for a suicide hotline, those things get flagged. Well, we're not always on our computers. We're not always checking our email, though some of us do it more than we probably should. But the nice part about the human review the human review component of Lightspeed is I'll get a phone call. So the members of the EOC in San Marcos are all the people that Lightspeed calls, and there's actually an order. So if I don't answer the phone, there's somebody else that gets called. And if that person doesn't answer, there's somebody else that gets called. But then we immediately respond. We see what that student was searching for, and then we can either call Sheriff's Department for a welfare check, or many times I'm the one on the phone with the family saying, we have this system in our district. I can see that currently your child is looking for this. Are you with your child? Are they okay right now? And then give them the resources they need. And then using those wellness teams that I talked about is a really, really important piece for when we have students that are drastically disconnected from school and really struggling to articulate how they're feeling or coping. They're the ones that are going in home to really set up those individualized plans. We're very fortunate. We have counselors, social workers, school psychologists, and nurses throughout our district. And one of the other things is all of them have received training. So we have made sure that we are now doing training with all of them at the same time so that everybody's hearing the same message. Everybody understands the same protocols and policies that are in place. So it's really, really helped streamline that. And students have multiple access points and places where they can go that are safe places for them.
Awesome. Thank you. And guys, we could probably continue talking for the next 2 or 3 hours about these things, but we got about 5 minutes left and there have been some questions that have been coming in. So I want to try and address as many of those as we possibly can. We do have a couple of resources that we want to share as we're getting into Q&A here. They'll be over on the right-hand side. You'll be able to download them and use them as you wish in your districts. But a couple questions that came in that I want to bring up to the panel here. First of which being, do you advocate for the use of facial detection AI for the purpose of early identification of threats to school sites? Who'd like to take that one on?
To me, it all depends upon the data and where it resides. As long as the facial recognition is a series of zeros and ones that doesn't go any further, then it's applicable piece that needs to go against some database or records or things like that. Honestly, I don't have a problem with it. I have a problem with it if it's ever captured and saved and reused and those kind of things. But as long as there's those precautionary measures in there for cameras, but I'm pretty sure there's a lot of cameras that I go by every single day that aren't taking those same things, but are still using it. What our job is to protect kids. So we're going to do as much as we possibly can. And we're going to figure out the legal aspects. We even have to deal with sometimes with how we use various things like that around our union agreements, right? How can that be used? So I think it really comes down to the question is how it's used and how it's accessed and how it's kept private. And I think most people would feel that that's important enough to do to our biggest prize, our children. So there we go.
Anybody else want to add anything to that?
I would just second what Jim said and just kind of just underscore how important it is whenever we're looking to make a change or add a tool to the tool belt, look at a new technology, to go back to that leadership law and policy bucket or domain. And Jim, you just did that, beautifully. The way law is interpreted in different states or even different parts of the state or by, whichever firm your district is utilizing, or maybe you even have, school law representation within your district. That's all really important to know. And, those folks have to be at the table whenever we're looking at new solutions so that we're sure we're using them in a way that is not going to do any harm to anybody. It's not going to, traipse upon any kind of laws or rights of our students and community members.
Thank you. I think we have time for.
That's all right. I was going to just add one other thing too that I really like, and maybe it's a kind of a thumbs up to Amanda, is the product itself. I've been really impressed with a lot of the improvements that come through, and you've heard me talk about this before, but a single pane of glass, right? I'm looking through something from a technology perspective. I'm seeing certain things that I need to make sure are proper and everything working. But then our SROs are going to be looking for other kinds of things. And our Christie's of the world, who I love working with, she's very much like a lot of the people I work with. And so they have their view that makes more sense to them. Because we have a lot of silos of information, and bringing those together and getting a better picture is what I've really liked about Lightspeed. And that's why I keep going that way, because you keep bringing more tools back in a integrated pane of glass. Sorry, I'm not trying to do a speech for it, but I really do.
We'll take it.
It's an interesting thing that technology has the power to do that. When we share those 6 domains with you guys, you could also look at them as 6 silos. Absolutely. And if they're not interconnected, if people are not working together, they're silos. But it is interesting that our tools and technology have the power to literally start bringing us together to look at information and look at these challenges and opportunities in our community so that we can do a better job together.
Spot on. I could not agree more. And Jim, feel free to talk about it as much as you'd like. We're good with that. We have time for one more question. And so this came in from one of the attendees. As Jim mentioned, the IT director role has changed significantly as it pertains to education in light of evolving technology and the increasing importance of digital security in educational institutions. Could this panel outline the top 3 critical needs they identify from the IT director position to effectively enhance school safety measures in the digital age?
Ooh, Christy.
That's
What do you
tough.
want out of your, what do you want out of your tech director, Christy?
I thought I was off the hook on this because this is all about IT.
Yeah, but what do you want from us, like us people? Because we are kind of odd sometimes, in schools. But we're here to help, and sometimes I think bringing that together and your expertise, where do you want to see things happen?
Yeah, I think I'm really fortunate. I work really closely with our IT director. And so, they do an awful lot, way more than I could ever understand in terms of blocking a lot of different sites and places that students could typically get to. And social media is one of them. So students cannot access social media on any of our Wi-Fi or on our district devices, I should say. And so I think that has really helped in a lot of ways. But I think it's more just in terms of top 3 critical needs. I would say the number 1 need is that collaboration. I think everything that both you and Michelle just talked about in terms of silos, because I don't speak tech, but I do speak kid. And I think we both speak safety. And so I think having ongoing conversations about, what resources she has, what I know, and then blending those 2 things together has been really, really helpful for us. So more than 3, I think that's just the number 1 is that continued conversation and making sure that everybody knows what everybody knows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just a shared mission too. We're all there for, first of all, safety and security kids. I just keep saying that over and over again, but I've said it multiple times. I've been saying it for years. That's our number 1 priority. It has to happen. And so now that everybody's more and more on board, and we're getting more and more people that are actually looking into various things and heading up those kinds of things, like the social emotional kind of pieces, I think that's so neat for us to work with, because they're kind of coming out more towards us and being able to bring it together. And we're able to come in and say, well, hey, we could do this and this and this. And it starts answering some of their gaps and some of their things that they've had too, some challenges they may have had. So I think most tech people want to have value and they want to give more back to the organization. So I would just encourage people that are not on the tech side to really reach out to your tech people and say, hey, what are some things that we could do for this and this and this? And it just, those conversations, just like Christy talked about, I think are extremely valuable.
Can I add one more special request? I would love to see more education, like pushed out, whether even if it's just little 5-minute nuggets for staff and students. We're big advocates of safety scenarios, just kind of stop and think, 5 minutes, discussion with students about this scenario. What would you do? And just kind of mining that and exploring that as teachable moments. Our staff needs that too. They're doing 1,000,001 things, way too many things. There's so much on everybody's plates right now, but we can't drop the ball on all these emerging concerns and issues related to technology. So my brother's an IT guy, so he has this trick that he does with every staff or organization he works with. He just pushes out these little nuggets, of what would you do if, or, okay, here's the scenario, break it down together. And that really engages our students. So we're all literally learning together. It engages our staff and helps us to realize in more meaningful ways why you can't click on that link or why you shouldn't do this, or, that just kind of keeps our hygiene up, as my brother would say. But opportunities to, to bring it to the people, I would say would be awesome.
One more thing, Ryan, just want to add.
And I was mistaken. We actually have a few more
slides and everything.
Yeah.
And she had that piece in there at leadership. And I really think that's a very, very important piece too. People look to the leaders to be able to define an agenda, vision, and those kind of things. And if you have a strong leader that puts this in the forefront every single time, I believe that everybody else tends to follow and start driving that way. So I love your breakdown on all this, Michelle. I'd never seen it before. And I really liked how those are the big issues. And you kind of got to separate them a little bit because you're dealing with different people and different timelines and all kinds of things. So I really like
Like
that.
the elephant, you kind of
Yeah.
need to be able to chunk it or you're just never going to get there, and kind of divide and conquer, but also just be able to bring it all back together.
So having worked in safety and security for 17 years now at this point, I like to equate it, I look at a school district as a dining room table, right? Everyone has a seat at that table, but they all have different responsibilities. The only way all of this is going to work is to make sure everyone's at the table at the same time and on the same page. And Jim, that's a great point. Leadership has to drive that from the top down, and lead by example, I guess is a good way to put it. And I was actually mistaken, everybody. We have a little bit more time, so we can take a couple more questions if you guys are good with that. Perfect. Question for Christy and Jim. How do you ensure students and staff's mental well-being with these increased security measures?
Christy, I really think you'd be better at this one.
Nice.
Well, she's sick today too. I feel bad.
One of the things that we have done is we've implemented surveys, and so and not just once a year. So we're doing surveys with our students and our staff, wellness specific, and so it's very, very tailored to that. They're short, but it really helps give us a grasp on where everybody's currently at. So in the beginning of the year, we get the baseline. Then it gives us the opportunity to kind of implement some different things based on what we see, and then about 8 weeks later, we do it again, and we can see, did it work? Did it not? And, and if it didn't, then what are we going to do differently? And if it is working, okay, great, let's keep that. And there's also an area where there's like a free response, and that's been really telling because it gives us kind of a really big look into what people are struggling with. And so, the other thing we do is, like I said, we have the crisis text line. We get data from them that we're constantly looking at. We have another partner we work with who helps us with mental health referrals, and we're able to actually see what types of referrals are being looked into. And so that helps us be able to target different staff and student wellness areas as well, and then kind of triage those situations. So I think, I think everybody, there's a huge focus on safety and well-being. I think in the very beginning of coming back into schools after the pandemic, we had a big focus on students, and I think a lot of people kind of forgot that the adults were also impacted, and so that's definitely something that we have been targeting as a district as well. And back to not being in silos, working a lot with our human resources and development department, because I'm a student services director who was doing a lot for staff, but we had an entire department that was actually there for staff, and they're not just there to hire and fire, they're also there to support. And so really working together with them for staff wellness, and then on my side of it, looking at student, but having that collaboration. And the only way we know if we're being effective is through those surveys and just the anecdotal data. But so looking beyond just process data of here's what we did, and looking at the impact data. What did it do for us? How did it help?
I just wanted to chime in and say, I know this question wasn't for me, but it's been really interesting hearing the responses in the last couple of questions. And, from the technology perspective, obviously technology does a lot of great things and helps enable quick identification and action and makes us more efficient. But it's just so interesting to hear because it really connects people in different roles and, helps enable coordination across different staff and support roles in the school. So it's really interesting to me to hear like what's top of mind for all of you guys and how you're working together, what you are looking for other roles. And like Michelle, your, organization and the ideas that you have or things that we can implement into the schools and like with technology as an aid, just kind of like brings everything full circle. And, we all have the same priorities.
It's so exciting. When I think of the meetings that we would have back in the day, I'm not going to date myself, but, we would have student support meetings for students that we just had a variety of concerns about. And these would be like once a week meetings. We'd bring all of the folks to the dining room table, right, to kind of solve for the issues that this child or this family was having, really in a way to try to be proactive, kind of stave off some of those needs before getting involved in a whole big process, maybe IEP or, any number of other big processes that we all know well. And that was so time intensive, everybody having to block their schedule. We were really honestly taking time out of the workday to have meetings like that, to be able to bring people together like that. It was really very difficult. We were dedicated, we would do it. But technology, it's a great example of how we can have those teams working more efficiently, but also in real time. We don't have to schedule a physical meeting anymore. It doesn't even have to be a Zoom meeting, which is another whole, great advancement for us. But we can in real time be utilizing these technological platforms to be informing each other, to be updating, to be adding resources, to be communicating, throughout the day while doing our 5, 6, 7 other duties that we have in schools. So it's very exciting.
Hey, Brian, if I can just add one last thing on it, and it's kind of ties in what Michelle just said. One of the things I was really happy about was had our social emotional coordinator through an Illinois Aware grant, which was money pushed down to the schools in order to help us do these things. She came to me and she's doing all these things. She's got all the call things and about suicide hotlines and all kinds of stuff for kids. But now she wanted to kind of really reach out to parents. And so she wanted to do a podcast. And I said, we can help you do a podcast and figure it all out. One of the best podcasts I've ever seen. She involved students' voices and all kinds of different things, went through this whole thing so that she could give it to parents so they could start understanding a little bit more about, the challenges of the phone, the challenges sending your kids to schools and the fears you feel might be normal and things like that. It's a really neat job. She's obviously an expert in her field and understands that area, but it was just kind of neat to be able to give her the technology to get it out there and put it out to people.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
I love that. That's awesome. Well, I think we've come to the end of time today. There was one more question that came in, Christy. Polly asked if they can obtain a sample survey, something that you like to push out to your parents and get a handle on the climate. Is that something that you might be able to provide?
What I can say is that it's through Panorama Education. And so if you go onto their site, you can see samples there.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, everybody, thank you so very much for your time today and for joining us. Panelists, thank you. You guys were great. As I mentioned in the beginning, part 2 of this series will be next week on the 27th. There's some information up on the screen here. You are already registered for it by registering for this webinar here, and reminder emails again will be sent out early next week. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Have a great rest of your week, and
Thank y'all.
we'll see y'all again soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ryan.